Hello, ladies. Happy Friday. Just let me get myself set up here. I want to make sure that I am actually live because I never trust technology, even though it says I am live. Yay. Okay, it's working. Perfect. So I'm going to put this here so that I can see what's going on. And welcome. Today's topic, we are doing an introduction to hormone sensitive intermittent fasting. And this is the exact protocols that I use with my clients inside my personal or my perimenopause body solutions personal coaching program. And I'm going to introduce you to two of those protocols. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about just like generally like what intermittent fasting is, because this is an introduction and I'm not going to assume that everybody knows what it is. We're going to talk about whether or not it is safe for women. And we're going to talk specifically about whether or not it is safe for women over the age of 35. We're going to talk about what I call hormone sensitive intermittent fasting. And then I'm going to give you two beginner protocols. So that's what we're going to be covering today. And I'll start by kind of just giving you guys a little bit of just a little bit of insight into what we're going to be talking today. So you probably have heard me talk a little bit about the Goldilocks principle in the past. And the Goldilocks principle is something that I learned from functional medicine, from functional practitioners that I follow, from naturopathic practitioners that I follow. And the Goldilocks principle is exactly what it sounds like: not too much, not too little, but just right. And I use this when I'm talking a lot about hormones. I use this when I'm talking about oh my goodness, I can't even think of what else. Definitely hormones, but it works really well here in the context of intermittent fasting. So not too much, right? So too much intermittent fasting can have a negative impact on our hormones and on our metabolism. Not too little, so not enough fasting can have a negative impact on our hormones and on our metabolism, but just right. And that is sort of what I consider to be this concept of hormone sensitive intermittent fasting, which is really about just getting it just right for your hormones and your metabolism as a woman that is over the age of 35. So today we're going to again, I already covered that. So I've got my notes here so I don't forget anything. Okay, so we're going to dive in. As always, I would love you guys to, if you're watching me live right now, and I can see that some of you have already joined, just put a hi or a hello or a live in the comments and let me know where you are joining me from so that I can see your comments pop up, and I can see that Cassie is here, and I see that Christine is here, and Gail is here. So hello, ladies. Just put a live in the comments. If you can do that, that would be much appreciated. If you catch this on the replay, just put a replay in the comments. If this is your first ever workshop, maybe you just joined the group and this is the first time that you are hearing me speak, just put first workshop in the comments. I would really appreciate that. What that does for me on my side is it helps me to get this workshop out to more of the members of our little community here. And I do these workshops every single Friday. Again, if you are new around here, I do them every Friday. I do various topics every single week. And it is my way of giving you some information that you can start to learn about how your body is working. You can start to get some of the strategies and the tips and the tricks and the tools that I use for myself and for my clients. And all of these workshops are absolutely free. And if you do want to speed up your results, or if you do need more support, you can also book a consult with me and tell me a little bit about what's going on to see if I can potentially help. You don't have to. That is for the women in the group that want more support or need more support or more guidance. Other than that, these workshops are free. And at the end of this workshop, I will tell you a little bit more about my program, because I do want women to know what I offer in case you are struggling and you need that support. Okay, so all right. Okay, just taking a look. So we've got some more ladies joining. Hello, Helen. Hi, Jill. Who else is here? Barb, hi Barb. All right, so let's dive in. So I'm going to start by just defining what intermittent fasting is. And again, this is pretty basic, but some of you might be completely new to it, so I don't want to make any assumptions, but really it is very simple. It is simply the practice of scheduling periods of time when you're eating and periods of time when you're not. That's really all it is. And some of the more sort of common protocols is there's sort of like different protocols that'll pop up, especially if you start Googling it or researching on YouTube. So some of the more common protocols would be a 12-hour fast, a 12-hour feast, or a 14-hour fast and a 10-hour eating window, or a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour window, 18 fast, 6-hour window, 20-hour fast and a 4-hour window, or something called OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, which is essentially a 24-hour fast. So those are like some of the different protocols that you'll see when you start researching intermittent fasting. And now there is no shortage of information. I think we all know that. If you've started researching, it is popping up everywhere. It is definitely sort of like one of the, I would say like the, I don't want to call it a fad because I don't think it's a fad, but it's definitely one of those sort of like popular diet strategies or weight loss strategies that is coming up more and more now. And I think this has to do with, number one, it can be a really great means of controlling caloric intake. And number two, intermittent fasting can have some really positive effects on some of the hormones that facilitate weight loss. So number one is that it helps to reduce insulin, which I talk about a lot. Number two is that it increases something called human growth hormone, which is really important for building muscle and burning fat. And it can also, it actually, and this is depending on the woman, but fasting does actually increase cortisol, which I usually talk about as not necessarily a good thing, but cortisol in small amounts actually does have fat burning effects. So it's not like a bad hormone. We just don't want to be chronically producing cortisol. So on top of that, so those are just more like some of the weight loss effects of intermittent fasting, but it is about way more than weight loss. Intermittent fasting can have a number of health benefits, and I'm not going to go over all of them because there are so many, but some of the big ones is that it can help with autoimmune conditions. It can help with blood sugar management. It can help with your blood lipid profile, so reducing cholesterol, improving triglyceride levels. It can help with cardiovascular function. It can help with brain health. It can help with markers of inflammation, so reducing inflammation, reducing oxidative stress, improving physiological aging, so how quickly we're aging. So lots and lots and lots of health benefits. And so, you know, again, it's no wonder that this practice is really gaining a lot of popularity. So I want to kind of explain a little bit. So I'm going to kind of focus a little bit more on weight loss because that's where most women come to me. And I'm going to sort of break down very simply a way for you to understand how, in the context of weight loss, this can be a great strategy to adopt. And again, this is an oversimplification. It is way more complicated than this, but what I like to do in these talks is really try to simplify things and focus a little bit more on the practical things or sort of like what you need to know about it. Okay. But you can kind of think that we are always in either a fed state or a fasted state, okay? And so when you're in the fed state, you're eating food and you're storing energy, or you're utilizing energy from food. When you're in a fasted state, you are burning energy and you are using stored energy. So a great way to think about it is that if you know that there's these two states, like fed and fasted. So if you stop eating for long enough, right, you are going to enter this fasted state, right? And this usually happens about 8 to 12 hours after a meal. And at this point, your body will stop getting the energy and the nutrients that it requires to function properly from outside sources, aka the food that you're eating, and it'll start to get that energy and those nutrients from inside sources, right? So from within the body. And this can be stored energy in your fat cells. It can be stored energy in your liver, stored energy in your muscles. But that's that sort of like really key thing that I want you to understand, is that your body then sort of makes this shift where it's like, okay, there's no food coming in, but we still need energy to function. So let's start looking inside the body and figure out where we can get that energy. Okay. And there's lots that goes on, like, you know, again, I said that's a very much an oversimplification, but some of the changes that are going to start happening when you're in that fasted state is blood glucose is going to come down, insulin is going to come down. You're going to see a rise in triglycerides. Triglycerides is the storage form of fat. And your body's going to you're going to start to see an increase in that, because your body's going to start taking those triglycerides and turning them into ketones and using those for energy. So there's these metabolic shifts that start happening, and there's more again to it than this. But from a fat loss perspective or a weight loss perspective, this metabolic shift kind of like from, again, oversimplification, it puts us in fat burning mode, right? It kind of sets the metabolism up for fat burning. And that's why it's really gaining this popularity in the weight loss industry. But it is not for everyone, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about today, because, and I'm going to read this because I want to make sure that I say this properly, and I want you to listen. Many of the benefits of intermittent fasting depend on fasting being intermittent, okay? So in other words, fasting too often or too long can reverse some of the potential benefits of intermittent fasting. And this is especially true if you are a woman, and especially true if you are a woman over the age of 35 that is going through perimenopause. And we're going to kind of talk about that today, and why I believe that women need a different approach, and that women in perimenopause, we really need a gentler approach, and that some of the more extreme, I don't even necessarily want to call them extreme, but some of the protocols that you can find online just are not the best probable choice for women our age. So one question that came up, I asked you guys, like, what do you want to know about intermittent fasting? And one of the questions that came up is it safe for women? And is it safe for women in perimenopause and menopause? And it's a topic that I wanted to talk about today. And if you have done any research into intermittent fasting, then you have probably found that you Google it and you're going to find some articles that say that intermittent fasting is unhealthy for women. And you're going to find some articles that say that intermittent fasting is perfectly fine for women, which is super confusing, because it's like, well, who do I listen to? And ultimately, I think that it's not black and white, right? Like, we can't start thinking about these questions as black or white. Like, the truth lies somewhere in between. And I think that intermittent fasting can be safe for women. It can be great for women. But I also think that if it is done incorrectly, I think intermittent fasting can have a negative impact on a woman's hormones and on her metabolism. And I want to kind of dive into that today. And that's, again, why I created what I call hormone sensitive intermittent fasting. So I want to start by explaining why women are more sensitive to intermittent fasting than men. And when I talk about this, you know, I don't want to be patriarchal. It's just, this is evolution and biology. Okay. And for those of you, you may not know this, but my background is in anthropology. I have a master's degree in anthropology. So I love looking at nutrition and lifestyle and hormones and metabolism from an evolutionary perspective, because it kind of helps to make sense of how our bodies are responding, because it's kind of like our bodies are responding in a very sort of primitive survival manner, even though we're living in a modern day society. And what's going on in our brain and what's going on in our body, sometimes there's like this disconnect. So basically, like, simply put, when we're going back to this concept of like, why are women more sensitive than men to intermittent fasting, what it boils down to is that women are actually more sensitive, that we're incredibly sensitive to overall energy balance, which is like this concept of calories in, calories out. Women are more sensitive to energy imbalance. So when there is less calories coming in than calories going out, right? For the female body, this is just more metabolically stressful. And so what can happen is that if the body senses this kind of stress, we can start to see elevated cortisol, we can start to see a decrease in thyroid function, we can start to see an increase in ghrelin, which is one of our hunger hormones, we can start to see a decrease in our sex hormones, so estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And basically, when it comes to fasting in particular, some of the research has really looked into something called the HPG axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis. And I like to think of this as, again, oversimplification, but I like to, really kind of not be overly sciencey when I'm explaining things, but think of it as the communication system between like your brains and your sex hormone, or your brain and your sex hormones, right? And so basically what happens is that when women are fasting, and again, it depends on what the protocol is, but if women are fasting too often, or if they are fasting for too long, what happens is that there is a hormone in our brain called kisspeptin that gets upregulated. So we have more of this hormone kisspeptin. And what kisspeptin does is it tells our body to produce less estrogen, less progesterone, and less testosterone. And again, this makes sense if you start to think from an evolutionary perspective and of sort of why our bodies evolved the way they did. Our bodies evolved as a woman to protect to survive, right? To protect our survival and to continue the species. And if we're in a situation where we're in a chronic caloric restriction, or we're fasting, which back then would have been starving, then it's not the time to have babies. So the body like down regulates all of that stuff. And if you're just like, okay, well, whatever, Haley, like I have no interest in having babies anymore, then here I think it's really important. And this is something that I don't think a lot of women necessarily know. I definitely did not know this until I started really searching this and researching this. But when it comes to like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, these three hormones in our bodies, and maybe you're like, testosterone, that's for dudes. No, it's for women too. But it's not all about just having a menstrual cycle. These different hormones play a number of roles in the body. And so when we see a decline in these hormones, we're going to start to see that show up as various things like anxiety, depression, weight gain, muscle mass loss, like bone density loss, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, like all of these things. Like this is how important these hormones are. And that's a topic for another day. But suffice, as a woman who is going through perimenopause, that is already starting to see a natural decline in these various hormones, these sex hormones, the last thing we want to do is add that stress of too much intermittent fasting and kind of push those hormones even further, because yeah, perimenopause is going to suck for you because you're not going to have the benefits of having those hormones. So let's see, let me just get back to my my notes here, because I kind of went off on a tangent. But yes, so that is, I just want you to understand that, again, what the research is showing is that for women, when we are doing too much fasting, we're going to have an impact on this axis and therefore our sex hormones. And once again, it's not just that, it's not just our sex hormones. If we start thinking about chronic caloric restriction, because oftentimes, like, especially if we're doing the longer fasts, like 16-8 or 18-6 or 24 or one meal a day, like we're not getting all of the nutrients that our body needs, and our body needs nourishment, right? Our body needs nourishment, and it does not like to be in a caloric deficit. Even if you want to lose weight, your body doesn't give a crap. It is there to protect you and survive. And the other important thing is, again, like this concept of metabolic adaptation, which I talk about all the time. Like, your metabolism isn't static, it is adapting. And so if we're pushing fasting too much, the body will adapt in order to compensate for what's happening, right? And that might be a downregulation of your thyroid. It might be more cortisol. It might be more ghrelin, and likely other things too. That's sort of what I focus on. But so anyways, I think that kind of covers it all. That's what I wanted to explain. But again, when I'm thinking about hormone sensitive intermittent fasting, I'm thinking again of that Goldilocks principle. So not too much fasting, not too little fasting, but just right. So not too little fasting, and I think that is certainly a problem in a lot of women's diets, is that and in modern society, I think we are eating too much, right? Like, we're eating too much, especially like this old concept of like, have a breakfast and then have a snack and then have your lunch and then have another snack and then have dinner and then have a late night snack. And suddenly, if we think of like either being in a fasted state or in a fed state, suddenly we're like spending more time in a fed state and not enough time in a fasting state. And then on the flip side, I'm seeing a lot of women who want to lose weight, who jump on like intermittent fasting, and maybe they start doing like, you know, they go until like say 2 p.m. every single day, and they're only eating 2 meals, and they're chronically restricting their calories, and they're going hard. And when it doesn't work, they go down to 1 meal a day. And now we end up again where we're doing too much fasting. So we have to find that happy medium, which is hormone sensitive intermittent fasting. And when I say hormone sensitive, what I'm talking about is like, yes, I want to lower your insulin. Yes, I want to improve your human growth hormone. Yes, I want to, control appetite, control calories. All of that is super important, but I want to think about your sex hormones. I want to think about your thyroid health. I want to think about your adrenal health. So I'm going to give you 2 beginner fasting protocols. And these are the 2 beginner protocols that I give to my clients inside the Perimenopause Body Solutions personal coaching program. And the first one is a simple 12-12 fast. So 12-12 fast is a 12-hour eating window followed by a 12-hour fasting window. It is a great introduction to just getting into the world of fasting. It's also a great protocol for women who have been fasting too often. So with women who I feel like they're going too hard on their fast, and I sense that their body is responding negatively, I'll be like, cut back, cut back, cut back. And so, because I want women to nourish their bodies. So 12-12 is really nice, as I think it's a really great daily practice. I think this is where we can start to see some of the benefits of intermittent fastings, like the reduction in insulin, the reduction in blood glucose levels, giving the gut a little bit of a break, starting to control our caloric intake, because for a lot of women, it means cutting out evening snacks. So just a 12-12 fast, it's a great, I think, I think you can safely say that every single woman would benefit from doing just a 12-12 fast. And certainly I think something that everyone should, or every woman should start working towards. So what does that look like? I'm not going to go in, I was going to kind of go into some of the science of exactly what's happening, like hour by hour, but I want to not talk too long because there was a bunch of questions that I want to get to. So guidelines that I give my clients is with a 12-12 fast is I want them to be eating 3 meals a day. So they're doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and only snack if they are hungry. Like, we don't need this concept of like, you have to eat every 3 hours. No, you don't need to, unless you have severe hypoglycemia, then maybe you have to until you figure that out. But for most women, like, we don't need to be snacking every 3 hours. So in a 12-hour window, you could certainly have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and maybe potentially 1 snack if you are really, truly hungry. And then, so again, you'd be eating every 3 to 4 hours with this protocol. I recommend that women stop eating 3 hours before bed. So as opposed to pushing breakfast in the morning, women benefit from stopping eating earlier at night. If you stop eating 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, it can actually improve your sleep. It can improve the production of melatonin, which helps you fall asleep. It can also help to boost the production of human growth hormone, which again is really important if you want to build muscle and burn fat. So stop eating 3 hours before bed and then just go to sleep. And in the morning, make sure that you've gone 12 hours ish, right? Ish. So that's the goal of that one. Is pretty simple, right? And what I do with my clients is we do that for 2 weeks, maybe. I think it's 2, maybe 3. I'd have to look at my schedule. I can't remember. But that's step 1. And then step 2 is the daily 14-10 fast. And again, for most women, I would say this is pretty safe. And I'll talk about sort of like what to kind of think about when it comes to fasting. But I would say that 14-10 is still very sensible and still hormone sensitive and a likely great daily practice for 95% of women that are out there. And so basically it's very simple, but why I like it is that it just extends that length of time that we spend in that fasted state. And if you remember, that fasted state I talked about at the beginning is when the body is no longer using outside sources of energy, and it's got to start tapping into those inside sources of energy, right? So it's got to start looking at like energy in the fat cells, energy in the liver, energy in the muscles, right? So we spend a little bit more time. It's not overly stressful on a woman's body. And this is something that women need to understand, is that stress, like intermittent stressor on the body. It can be a positive stressor, but it is a stressor on the body. And when the body is under stress, what goes up? Cortisol, right? And so you got to think about this. Like if you, and we're going to talk a little bit about this a little bit further on because it came up as one of the questions, but when you understand that whether you like it or not, intermittent fasting is a stressor and it will impact your cortisol levels. If you are already super stressed out, you're chronically restricting your calories, you're going to CrossFit 5 days a week, you've got deadlines, you've got bills to pay, maybe you're going through a divorce or you just lost your parent, you have already got so much stress in your life that going anywhere past 14 hours and jacking up those cortisol levels, it's no longer going to be a positive stressor, it's going to be a negative stressor. So again, you know, we have to start thinking like of intermittent fasting. Like I like to think of it as you got to look at where your stress load is. And if you're not in your sweet spot, if you've already got too many stressors happening in your life, anything beyond 14 is probably just going to add to those stressors, and it's not going to have the positive impacts or the positive benefits that you want it to have. Okay. Now, the other reason I like 14-10 is that it still allows plenty of time for 3 meals, but it's a nice way of starting to kind of keep those calories even more in check. And so if you are looking to lose weight, you know, you do have to be in a caloric deficit, just not like a crazy one, but you do have to be in a caloric deficit. And going into that 10-hour window of eating, it makes it so much easier to just have 3 meals and cut the snacks. And again, in doing that, you are naturally going to eat less, especially if you're eating the right foods, but that's a topic for another day, probably. So what would that look like? So again, you're eating, what are the guidelines that I give my clients? So you're still eating 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're eating about every 3 to 4 hours based on hunger, right? So if you, you have a big breakfast and it's 1 o'clock and it's time for lunch and you're like, oh, I'm not that hungry. Well, don't force feed yourself, eat according to hunger. Stop eating when you're satisfied to full. And then maybe just skip that snack and go straight to dinner, right? Like see how your body feels. Still stop eating before bed, 3 hours before bedtime, same reasons as the 12-12 fast, but then you're going to extend the fast overnight and you're going to add on that extra 2 hours. And so you're spending an extra 2 hours in that fasted state without putting too much stress on your body. Okay. So that is kind of what the 2 protocols that I like to do. And with that one, I'll keep women in that protocol for about 4 weeks before we do anything longer. And on that point, I really believe, I was talking to someone about that this week, who was like, oh, I really find fasting hard. Like, I'm really, really hungry. And I truly believe that you have to start thinking about fasting as a muscle that you're training. So same, like, you wouldn't go to the gym and suddenly like pick up like, go to the bench press and try and like bench press like 75 pounds. You would start off at a lighter weight and you would slowly work your way up, right? Well, with fasting, I think the same is true. Like, it's a muscle, you can train it. Start with smaller fasts and slowly extend the time as you're building that fasting muscle, and your body gets used to it. Because again, we're trying to minimize how stressful fasting is. And our body gets used to these natural circadian rhythms, and your body gets very used to your eating schedule, right? And so you may, like, if you eat at the same time, your body like gets used to it, right? And so it's like, if you always have breakfast at 8 and your body's like at 8 o'clock, it's like, oh, let's start cueing hunger, and then you eat whatever and you move through your day. But if your body's used to that and you suddenly try to go to a 1, yeah, that's going to be a stressor on the body. So it's nice to just kind of, again, ease into it, give your body a chance to adapt to the changes that you're making. So what about longer fasts? So this is where we have to start being a little bit smarter about fasting, in my personal opinion. And I think that if you're going to be fasting any longer than 14 hours, then I would personally recommend that you work with someone who understands the impact that fasting can have on your hormones and on your metabolism, so that you can create a schedule that makes sense for you and your body, that is safe, that's going to give you the health benefits without causing too much stress, right? So some of the things that I think about when I'm thinking about doing longer fasts is, again, like, what is your overall stress load? And inside my program, I try to reduce stressors as much as possible. And this isn't just mental stress, right? This is like inflammation, circadian, glycemic balance, obviously mental stress as well, physical stress, like how much exercise my clients are getting, right? So I'm managing their stress load. I also want to look at appetite, right? And I think this is a key one for women, because again, when it comes to these longer fasts, you have to make sure that you can still get the energy and the nutrients that your body needs to function. And if you have a small appetite and you're limiting your eating window, you're going to end up in chronic caloric restriction. I'm one of those women. Like, I have like naturally a smaller appetite. So the moment I go even like a 16-8 fast, I can only do 2 meals. I can't stuff 3 meals into an 8-hour window. I might be able to do 2 meals and a snack, but I don't have enough of an appetite. And that means that if I do that chronically, then I am chronically going to have macro and micronutrient deficiencies. Then I'm going to look at nutrient status, right? Like where you have to think of nutrient status, like the quality of getting, if you're going to do these longer fasts. The longer the fast you do, in my opinion, your eating window has to be more and more solid. You have to make sure that the foods that you're getting in that eating window are going to nourish your body the way it needs to. And I know some people on the internet will tell you that one of the benefits of intermittent fasting is that you can eat whatever you want in your window. And while potentially, yes, maybe you can, if you're like a man that is 300 pounds overweight, or not overweight, but 300 pounds. And, this is the only thing you can do, then yeah, potentially that might help. But I think for most people, we really, like, the shorter the window, the more we have to be conscientious of what we're eating in that window to give our body what it needs. We have to start thinking about, we have to look at like your metabolic identity. Like, do you have a thyroid problem? Do you have hypothyroidism? Do you have adrenal fatigue or a history of adrenal fatigue? How are your current energy levels? What kind of activity do you do? Are you training for an endurance event like an Iron Woman? Then yeah, fasting probably isn't going to be your best friend. What are your overall goals? What's your relationship with food? This is a huge one, right? Like, if you have a bad relationship with food, if you have some kind of like disordered eating with food, not necessarily just like anorexia or binge eating, but just a challenging relationship with food, this can exasperate it, right? Again, I think 14 hours, you can still just think of it as like a healthy lifestyle, but anything longer than that, and we are going into sort of like that sort of more restrictive diet mentality. And so we have to be careful about that. I think you have to look a little bit at your sleep, right? Like your sleep patterns, and start to think about, is intermittent fasting going to have a negative impact on that? Looking potentially at blood work, right? Of trying to figure out like, okay, well, from a physiological perspective, can you take it? Can you take it or not? And then the other thing to maybe consider is timing some of your fasting with your menstrual cycle. For some women, they can sync up with the different phases of their menstrual cycle. And, you know, there are certain times where it's easier to do the longer fast and certain times where it's harder. For example, when women are PMSing, they're hungrier and their energy levels are low. So maybe that's not the best time to try and push like a longer fast. But again, I really feel like women probably need a little bit more support if they're going to go anything beyond like a 14-hour fast, to make sure that they're getting those benefits and not getting some of the potential negative consequences. So we're gonna talk about, we're gonna get into the questions, but like I said, I do want to take a moment to tell you guys a little bit about my program. So inside my program, I do teach women about hormone sensitive intermittent fasting, and I teach them how to coordinate it, like how to do the longer fasts, how often to do them. And I'll give you a tip: the longer you're fasting, the less often you should do it, how to match it up with their carbs, how to match it up with their workouts, how to manage other stressors in their life while they're doing it. So that is one element of the personal coaching program. In the coaching program, it's 6 months. It's a lifestyle. It's not a diet. I teach women how to eat for their hormones, how to eat for the changes that are happening to their metabolism. I teach them how to create a low carb lifestyle, how to incorporate fasting, how to incorporate carb cycling, what kind of workouts they should be doing. I give them all of the support that they need. So if you want more support in creating a fasting lifestyle, or in losing weight, or in trying to create new habits, then what I would highly recommend you do is book an initial consult with me. There's no strings attached. This is not a pressure call whatsoever. What we do on that call is basically, I take a look at your goals, your current situation. I ask you a bunch of questions about your nutrition, your lifestyle, your any health concerns that you have. And from there, I kind of share with you, okay, well, this is potentially what might be going on. You know, like, do you need to like work on consistency? Are there potentially some deeper root causes? What do we need to address? If I think I can help, I kind of go into detail with the program a little bit more and just give you the information that you need to decide if it's a good fit. So if that's something that you want to do, just reach out and just say, I want to book an initial consult. I'll send you the link to my calendar, and we can get you in, and I can get to know you a little bit better. Okay, so let's talk about the questions here. All right, so we had a bunch of questions come in. Some are easy, some are a little bit lengthier. I'm going to keep this to another like 15 minutes max, because we've already been here for almost 45 minutes, and then we'll jump off from there. Okay, so what can you eat, drink during the fasting period? So again, I'm not a black and white kind of coach. I think that if you want to avoid all calories during that fasting window. So I tell my clients to try and stick to herbal teas, water, black coffee, black tea, ideally no cream, ideally no sweeteners. Even the sweeteners, even the 0-calorie sweeteners, what can happen is that when the sweetness touches your tongue, what a lot of women don't realize, but like, the digestive process starts there, right? And just that little bit of sweetness can start to trigger some of the hormones, including insulin, that can kind of pull you out of fasting. But it's not like you get out of fasting like, in an instant. I like to think of it as a dial, right? So again, that's why I'm not black and white, because ultimately, like, even if you put a little bit of cream in your coffee, for instance, maybe you turn down the fasting dial, but you're not like turning it off completely, and you're still getting a lot of the benefits. So I try not to think of it in terms of black and white, but ideally no calories, no sweetener. But for some women, that's a little bit of a challenge. And it also depends on your goals, right? Like if one of your goals is simply to use fasting as a tool to control your caloric intake, and in doing so, you can avoid, have a bit of cream in your coffee in the morning, but then not like binge eat at night. Well, maybe that's totally worth it for you. Is there a sign that your body is ready or a good time to try extended fasting? So, I would say that when it comes to doing the longer fast, I really feel like this is where women have to kind of really listen to their body. And so and don't set yourself up with hard rules, right? Like, let's say you decide, okay, I'm going to try like an 18-hour fast or whatever it may be. Well, if 14 or 15 hours into it, like you are truly hungry and maybe you're even a bit lightheaded or shaky, break the fast and eat some food, right? Like that, I think the sign is, as much as possible, you want it to feel, easy, right? And yes, there are waves of hunger in those longer fasts, like, and you should be able to ride that wave, and the wave kind of comes and goes. Like I said, your body's probably on a circadian rhythm. And so for your body, it's probably like, it's 12 o'clock, it's time for food. And so you might sort of see that wave, right? But the way I like to see it is like, if you can ride the wave in half an hour and then it kind of goes away, it's not stressful on your body. If the wave kind of comes and then it gets worse, and then you get shaky or you get dizzy and you get kind of like maybe sweaty, well, okay, this is stressful on your body. Listen to your body and eat some food, right? So really, I think here, like trusting your body. Is adding OMAD into a fasting schedule good for maintenance? So when it comes to OMAD, which stands for 1 meal a day, again, for OMAD, I think that it can have some great benefits. Like the longer you are fasting, some of the health benefits, like there are different health benefits. So one, for example, is this concept, or not this concept, but something called autophagy or cellular cleansing. And that seems to start to happen right around the 17-hour mark. And so throwing in some of these longer fasts every once in a while can certainly have some benefits, right? There are health benefits to these longer fasts, and I'm not against them. I think it's just really important that women see it as something that they do periodically, every so often. So maybe you throw in an OMAD, every 2-3 weeks, and maybe you do it on a day where you're not working out, it's pretty chill. It's not like you're super stressed out at work, or you have like this major deadline to hit. So again, like, try and be a little smart about it. Recognize that it is a stressor on the body. Think of your overall stress load, throw it in every once and again. And if you do decide that you're going to do it, listen to your body on that day. And if your body's like, hey, you know what, this is not the best day to do an OMAD, don't do the OMAD. Okay, what is the best first thing to ingest or eat when you're breaking a fast? So again, here, I think that this is a hard one, because, some people come into fasting and they're not necessarily following any kind of nutrition protocol, right? So my clients do like a low carb protocol. So I like to think of it as we do lower carb, moderate protein, healthy fats, high fiber. That's how I describe it. And so if they're doing a shorter fast, like a 12-12, a 14-10, or a 16-8, then I'll just be like, yeah, just follow the nutrition principles that I've been teaching you. And they know how to build a meal. And so I wouldn't say I even worry about it too much, but I do like to do like the lower carb, because it does keep the insulin levels lower. If it's a longer fast, then like I was kind of saying, if you're going into a longer fast and you've got a shorter window, then you have to be more and more vigilant, or focused on getting the nutrients that your body needs inside that eating window. And as you guys know, my favorite macro is protein. And so even when my clients are doing a longer fast with a shorter eating window, I still kind of want them to get all of the protein in their day. And so I like to break the fast with something high protein. And so maybe like say, for example, on an 18-6 schedule, so 18 hours of fasting, 6 hours of eating, I might be like, okay, break the fast with a naked shake, which is just like legit, just like protein powder and water and maybe a little cocoa powder if you want to, and get a big bolus of protein and then have 2 meals. Okay. So I like to break the longer ones with like, I love doing sort of like a big protein bolus and then some regular meals after that. Does coffee in the morning break the fast? We kind of already talked about that one. Do you have to be fat adapted before starting intermittent fasting? No, you don't, but I do think it helps. So, for those of you who don't know what fat adapted is, so essentially fat adapted is a term from the ketogenic realm. But you don't necessarily have to be in ketosis to become fat adapted. Another word that kind of describes it is metabolic flexibility. But essentially what it boils down to is that you want to make sure that your body knows how to tap into your stored fat, your stored energy in your fat cells before you jump into intermittent fasting. Because if you don't, it's going to be miserable, right? Because ultimately, what we want when we're fasting and we're in that fasted state and we're extending that fasted state is we want our body to go and get all of the energy that we have stored around our belly, on our hips, on our butt, and in our, our, what do they call them? Like our wings or whatever, right? Like that's what we're kind of hoping the body is going to do. But not everybody can not every woman can tap into those energy stores. Some women are metabolically inflexible, and this is when they see weight loss resistance. And so becoming fat adapted basically just means that you're developing the metabolic flexibility to access the stored energy in your fat cells. And one way of doing this is to deplete your glycogen stores to get into ketosis. You can get into mild ketosis. And when you do that, you deplete the glycogen, you force the body to adapt and you force the body to figure it out, basically. So again, a little bit of a stressor on the body at the beginning, but eventually the body is like, oh, wait a minute, there's plenty of calories on this body. I can just use fat instead. So that is what fat adapted is. And it pairs wonderfully with intermittent fasting because it kind of speeds up. I mean, eventually, if you're not in ketosis, your body will figure it out. But in my opinion, like that whole fat adaptation kind of speeds up that process because you're training your body how to use fat before you start those extended fasts. And then you get into the extended fast and your body's like, oh, okay, no big deal. I'll just use fat. I know what to do. Right. So that's kind of like sort of the way that I like to think of it. So again, what I do in my program with my clients is we go through 5 weeks of mild ketosis. I don't even call it ketosis in the program, but ultimately that's what it is, where we're keeping our carbohydrates low enough that the body is forced to utilize fat for fuel. And once my clients have gone through 4 weeks of doing that, that's when I start to introduce the fasting. Okay. All right. Should I exercise when fasting? This kind of comes back to this whole concept of stress, right? So again, I like to think of stress in terms of there are certain things that drain our body and there are certain things that charge up the body. And exercise is a stressor. It's a physiological stressor. It does stress out the body. And so if you're pairing, exercise, caloric restriction, fasting, a stressful job, then it's like drain, 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 drain. So what I like to do with my clients is say, okay, let's save the longer fast for the days that you're not working out and on the days that sorry, I'm not even going to go there because it's going to confuse you. Let's just say on the days that they're not working out so that I'm minimizing the stress on the days that they're doing their longer fasts. How many days in a row should you do intermittent fasting? Again, here, I really think that it's going to depend on the length of your fast. As a general rule of thumb, the longer the fasting window, the less often you should be doing it. I think you can do 12-12 on a daily basis. I think most women can do 14-10. Anything beyond that, and I don't think it should be done on a daily basis. I think you should be doing at least an alternate day in between where you're taking a break. And if you're going to do those longer ones, like the 16-8 or the 24 or any kind of OMAD, I really think that you should have periods where you're fasting and then take a break from it, right? Is it good for women over 60? Yes, absolutely. I think it's perfectly fine. Again, look at your stress load, but for women over 60, one sort of advantage that you have is that you no longer have those phases, that menstrual cycle. You don't have those phases. A lot of women struggle with longer fasts in the luteal phase, the second half of their cycle. If you are post-menopause, you don't have to worry about that. You just kind of go about your intermittent fasting as you please. Can it help with cholesterol levels? Yes, it can. That is one of the benefits that research has looked at, is a decrease in overall cholesterol. How do you know if intermittent fasting is impacting you negatively? Another great question here. So some of the things that I like to look for in my clients is one is, and this is an easy one to remember, is your HEC in check. So HEC is hunger, energy, cravings. And this is just a little formula that I learned from one of my mentors, Dr. Jade Tita. So we're looking at your hunger levels, your energy levels, your cravings. So again, like if your energy starts to tank, that's what I usually see in my clients, is their energy starts to tank. And that's when I'm like, well, we need to back off the fasting a little bit here. This is your body saying, okay, I need a break. And so that's a big one that I look at. I don't usually look at hunger, because what I find is that when women get into intermittent fasting, a lot of them start to see that they lose their hunger signal, right? And it's like, oh, I don't want to eat. I have a lot of women that come to me that are not eating and are fasting all the time. And the first thing I do is I'm like, and you're going to eat in a 12-12 window, and you're going to start eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so again, that's a kind of a little bit of a tricky one. And cravings, I think that's another one. Just one of the women that commented that I was then having a conversation with was saying that, she's been fasting until 1 or 2, or was fasting until 1 or 2, but then was starving and couldn't stop eating. So again, like if you're fasting, if you're trying to push the fast, but then you can't control your appetite after, you're fasting too long. Shreds is another concept that I got from another one of my mentors, and that stands for sleep, hunger, recovery, energy, digestion, and stress, right? Which we've kind of covered, but those are sort of like the 6 different biofeedback mechanisms that you should be keeping an eye on to determine how your nutrition protocols are working for you. So, if you have poor sleep, if you can't regulate your hunger, if you're not recovering well from your workouts, if you're super tired all the time, your digestive system is all messed up, and you're super stressed out, adding more stress from intermittent fasting is probably not a great idea. And then, of course, I'm always looking for signs of metabolic adaptation, like thyroid function. So for instance, if my clients start complaining again about low energy, or they need to sleep all the time, or they're cold all the time, or they're constipated, then okay, well then we have to start thinking about thyroid function. Or if they have like low energy, or they have less motivation, or they hit a weight loss plateau and nothing is moving anymore, these are all signs that potentially the metabolism is adapting to our protocol, and we got to switch it up. And a lot of times switching it up means pulling them out of a diet phase and taking a diet break, upregulating their metabolism so that we can move into a fat loss phase later on. Okay, so this is the last question, which is why is intermittent intermittent fasting not working for you. So let's say you start intermittent fasting and you're just like, okay, everyone on the internet told me I was going to lose weight and I'm not losing weight. Like, what the F? So a couple of things to think about is, number one is, I still think you need to control your calories inside your eating window. So just because you're intermittent fasting does not mean you get to eat what you want during your eating window. You still have to, you need some form of tracking system or a portion control. Doesn't mean you have to track your macros and count your calories, but you do need a system, and you have to make sure that you are, that you're at least in maintenance. And, I would say, there's definitely, if you go online, they'll tell you that you'll read that with intermittent fasting, you don't necessarily need to be in a caloric deficit to see weight loss. And this is true. I have seen the research. But if you are eating at maintenance and you're still not losing weight, we'll try and get in a bit of a caloric deficit and see if that kind of just pushes the needle a little bit. Potentially you're not eating enough in your eating window, okay, which I've talked about a lot today. But again, if you're fasting too often and for too long, and you are chronically restricting your calories and you're not nourishing your body and you're not getting the macronutrients and the micronutrients that your body needs, you're stressing your metabolism out, and it might just be like holding on for dear life, because again, that's what our body was designed to do. If you're not in your sweet spot, right? If there are too many drains on your system and not enough charges on your system, again, stress around the metabolism's going to go into lockdown. You're eating the wrong foods in your eating window. So again, there's mixed opinions on the internet on this, but again, if you're watching your caloric intake, and you're doing your fast, but during your eating window, maybe you're just kind of like eating whole foods and maybe eating a couple of cheats, we'll try and tighten up the quality, like try and at least stick to whole foods. And if that's not working, try and like play around with your macros. Like what happens if you try my approach, like a lower carb, moderate protein, healthy fats, high fiber, then what happens? Then does that again push the needle a little bit more? And if none of that works, I would say then there's probably a deeper root cause. And this is when you've got to start investigating. You've got to start looking at like your hormones. You've got to start looking at your blood work. You've got to start looking at potentially like what is going on, because if weight loss resistance, it's probably a sign or a symptom of something deeper going on, and you just got to figure it out. So there we have, that was a big one. Holy smokers. Okay. 5 minutes. Do you guys have any questions? How do you know if you're getting the proper nutrients when you're feeding after you have fasted? So, Cassie, how do you know if you're getting the proper nutrients? This, I think here is, you got to just follow certain principles, right? Like there's lots of different ways that you can do that. You can track your calories, you can track your macros, you can, follow a list of getting the right foods, like eat really good food, right? Like eat real food. That is where I would start. Just eat real food, and control your portion sizes. I mean, we could do like a whole series on that one, but I think it starts with just eating real food. Okay, let's see if there's anything else here. Any other questions, ladies? I feel like I covered a lot, so hopefully that gave you a good little intro there. I have created a little Google Doc with those protocols. So if you'd like that, what I'm going to get you to do is just put Google Doc in the comments. And then when we're sending out the replays, we will know to also send you the Google Doc if you want it. And thank you for the love. Thanks for the thumbs up and the hearts, ladies. I truly appreciate that. If you like this workshop, please make sure to comment on the video. It really helps me once again to get this workshop out to more ladies. If there's a topic that you would like me to talk about, let me know. Next week, I'm going to do another Q&A because you guys loved it last week. So I'm going to do another one next week. So start thinking about the questions that you have that you would like me to answer. And it can be about anything like nutrition, hormones, metabolism, macros, calories, sleep, stress management, whatever it is. You start thinking about what you want, and start writing them down, because I'm going to put up a post next week. I'm going to ask you what you want to learn about. We're going to be doing it on Thursday next week, because then I am heading up to Stewart, Alaska with my family to go check out some glaciers. And I'm going to be off the grid for a couple of days. So that's it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something. If you did learn something, can you put that in the comment? Let me know one thing that you learned. And more importantly, what is one thing that you are going to implement as of today? Because you can listen to all the workshops, but if you're not implementing any of the information that I'm teaching you, then you're not going to see any changes. And I know that there are a lot of women in this group that are seeing massive changes to their health, to their body composition, to their weight by simply getting these free or listening to these free workshops and implementing the knowledge. So there we have it, ladies. Thank you so much. And I will see you all next week. Bye. Oh, I got to figure out how to turn this off. I'm like, bye, but I'm still here. Wait a minute, and bye.